Chapter 13. On the ground. Seth forced the door to the aircraft open and a deafening blast of wind assaulted the cabin.
Ladies first.
He smirked. Diane pushed him aside and, without hesitating, hopped delicately out of the aircraft. John clapped me hard on the shoulder.
See you on the ground,
He said wryly. John took a bit of a leap and out the door he went.
Don't die.
Seth mocked.
I don't plan on it.
I countered. Seth took a bit of a running leap and dove out of the door. I took one last deep breath. I only received parachute training one time, and I did not enjoy it. Some people found plummeting to the earth freeing. It made me feel helpless. I peered out into the sky, shut my eyes, and let myself fall out of the door. I immediately felt the air pushing back on my body as I plummeted downward. If it wasn't for seeing the ground rapidly approaching, I wouldn't even know that I was falling. It felt more like floating. I could see that the others were a fair bit further down than I was, so I positioned my body into a nosedive to gain some speed. I slowed myself at a safe distance alongside John and Seth. Diane was still a ways off from us. I allowed myself a moment to take in the splendid view from above. Off in the distance, purple mountains reached into the heavens. It felt strange to be higher than those ancient giants. A series of little streams and rivers canvassed the landscape as if a god had spilled a bottle of blue ink onto his handiwork. Near Fort Romkin, ugly stumps and brown earthen structures marred the earth, however. The war machine had required abundant fuel and materials. I shared in the guilt of the haphazard harvest. I had taken part in the reaping, clearing the undergrowth to rob any enemy soldiers of a nest to hide in. The fort sat on a hill, like an ugly black scab, waiting for us. Thick concrete walls dotted by towers kept guard over the entrance to the inner courtyard of Fort Romkin. Though the fortification could be seen above ground, the bulk of the infrastructure tunneled below the earth like a mass of great slumbering serpents. John motioned to me that it was time to deploy my parachute. I pulled the ripcord and immediately felt the pressure yank on my body. It felt like slamming on the brakes in order to avoid hitting a person who was carelessly crossing the road. John followed suit soon after, and we both drifted at a much more comfortable pace down toward the ground. However, Seth continued to plunge toward Diane, and they both rocketed closer and closer to the ground. Neither of them had opened their chutes yet. Could something be wrong with their parachutes? I thought. Diane had said that we all had a good chance of dying, but I didn't think it would be quite so soon, especially for those two. The pair hurtled through the air until finally, Seth released his parachute no more than 500 feet from the ground. Diane's opened shortly thereafter. I breathed a sigh of relief, grateful that I wouldn't have to clean them up with a mop. Diane landed gracefully, with Seth hitting the ground roughly a few moments later. John and I aimed for the clearing behind the hill where they had landed and prepared to touch down. John and I landed on the ground with a thud. I stumbled a bit, but John, in spite of his advanced age, didn't so much as stagger. Seth and Diane were already packing up their parachutes and hiding them by the time we reached them.
I win again,
Bragged Diane.
Pay up.
Yeah, I don't want to hear it.
Mumbled Seth. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a shiny black wallet, and removed several wrinkled bills that he then handed to Diane. She greedily snatched them out of his hand.
Thank you.
Diane boasted. John waved me over.
Seth and Diane do this every time we have to parachute out of a plane for a mission. They make a bet on who will open their parachute last.
He explained.
So far, the score is 17-11 in favor of Diane.
I always win,
Sang Diane,
Almost always.
admitted Seth. While Diane and Seth verbally sparred, John clambered up the steep earthen hill we had landed behind. He pulled a pair of compact binoculars from his pack and examined the topography leading to Fort Romkin. After he had considered the landscape, he slid back down the hill on his heels and rejoined us. By that time, thankfully, Seth and Diane had settled down. Seth stretched and yawned.
This should be simple. We need to get in, destroy the labs and research, and get out. If anyone or anything gets in the way, we kill them.
Seth said, smiling wickedly. Seth had a one-track mind,
That's not everything. I get to look for information on my brother.
I reminded. Seth shrugged in response,
It does not appear that we have been spotted.
claimed John, rubbing his head.
That's good, right?
I questioned,
Technically, but
began Diane.
But not expected.
Seth interrupted.
I thought they would have seen us and sent someone or something to investigate.
are there any secret entrances around here that we should be aware of?
Asked Diane hopefully. I shook my head.
Not that I'm aware of.
I stated.
Pity.
She shrugged, disappointed. Seth bent down to look me in the eyes.
You're the expert on the terrain here.
Insisted Seth.
How do you suggest we get inside?
I suggest
I said firmly.
that we use the time between now and sundown to observe the base and see if anyone or anything enters or exits. I don't want us going in blind and stumbling into a patrolling group of soldiers.
That gives us about 4 hours.
John noted.
One of us should be positioned on the hill in front of us while the other should keep watch behind us. The remaining two should take this opportunity to get some rest. It might be our last chance for a while.
I proposed.
No campfires allowed.
I added.
And here I was, hoping we'd have a chance to roast marshmallows.
Sniffed Diane. It was decided that John and Diane would take the first watch. Diane positioned herself stealthily on the hill in order to keep her eyes on the base. Scoping out the potential dangers before attempting to infiltrate the base would be paramount to the mission's success. John took up his position at the rear of the group. An attack from behind by enemy forces would prove fatal. Meanwhile, Seth and I made ourselves as comfortable as possible at the foot of the lumpy hill. The hard ground and lack of grass didn't exactly make for a suitable mattress, but our packs made acceptable pillows. Seth and I sat in silence for some time, but it became clear that neither of us was going to doze off. Surprisingly, Seth broke the silence.
How long were you stationed at this fort?
He questioned. I didn't feel like talking to Seth, but it was important that I made an effort to blend into the team. My safety may depend on it. In response to his question, I ran a quick tally in my head.
I was here for about 2 years, and before that I was in a city south of here for 1 year.
I answered.
What was your role?
He probed.
Why are you so talkative all of a sudden?
I asked suspiciously. Seth shrugged.
We're about to break into a dangerous military outpost, and you're supposedly meant to be an asset on this mission. Though I may defer to those higher up on the food chain than I am, I don't know you. I don't always trust that the underground's judgment is better than my own.
Seth snarled. I clenched my teeth.
My role,
I seethed.
was the leader of my unit in the military police. Leader of the unit you murdered.
Seth's flat expression didn't change.
It was a war. You've killed people, haven't you?
He shot back.
That's different. I didn't enjoy it like you did.
I croaked.
You would have if you had stayed in a military like that for long enough.
Seth replied.
It makes it easier.
Why would he say that? I thought. He had a point, though. Pulling the trigger the second and third time is easier than the first.
If you're allowed to ask me questions, then I have a few of my own.
I snapped.
What do you get out of all of this?
Seth paused for a moment.
It's my job.
He answered.
And if you have to do something to live, you might as well enjoy your work.
His facial expression implied that he thought the reason should have been obvious. I didn't think it was wise to reveal that Diane and Daniel had already revealed a little about Seth's origin, past, and upbringing. Seth wasn't alone when it came to not entirely trusting members of this team. We passed the rest of our turn at rest, in silence. The already tense mood had tightened even further after our conversation.
Hey guys,
Diane called from on top of the hill.
you might want to take a look at this.
Seth and I scrambled up to the top of the hill, the unease between us momentarily forgotten. Diane was still peering through her binoculars when we joined her. I squinted, but I couldn't make out anything interesting in the distance. There were no vehicles, soldiers, or aircraft to be seen. Below us, John had returned from watching the rear. He looked up the hill and down the hill and back up the hill. He scowled. He clearly wasn't excited about having to crawl back up the steep mound of soil. Diane nudged me with her shoulder.
Here,
She handed me the binoculars.
take a look.
I grabbed the binoculars and pressed them to my face.
There,
She pointed to something in the distance.
just beyond that split tree and next to that dugout pit. Do you see it?
I searched for the area she described until, finally, I found it. All I caught was a flash of skin and fur. It wasn't like any animal I had ever seen. I wasn't even sure it was an animal at all.
You saw it, right?
Queried Diane.
I think so.
I hesitated,
Got it.
confirmed Seth.
Shall I engage?
Hold for now. Give John a few moments to get some shots off.
Ordered Diane. Silently, John appeared by my side. He had made it up the hill remarkably fast for a man of his age.
Do you have a shot?
Diane asked coolly.
I do.
John replied.
Take it.
She ordered. John let loose a handful of shots from his rifle. The heavy thunk-thunk every time he reloaded matched the rhythm of my heartbeat. He stopped, and the creature he was firing at fell with a heavy thud to the ground at the bottom of our perch. I got a better look at the animal and retched. It was the size of 2 men, in both height and width, and covered in patchy fur and scales all over its hulking body. It had the head of an insect, with snapping mandibles. A sickening brown foam bubbled from one corner of its mouth. However, the body of the beast was not that of an insect. It had ape-like shoulders but the hooves of a horse. It had both the fur of a mammal but also the slick scales of a reptile. An octopus tentacle sprouted from one of its gnarled legs, but that wasn't the monster's worst feature. At the center of the abomination's back was a human arm and hand. Although the creature had collapsed and was dead or dying, the arm on its back continued to paw and grasp weakly at the air. Even in death, the beast still struggled to reach for anything it could throttle. I turned away from my group, heaved, and vomited.